Hello and welcome to the new demo slash launch announcement video of TaskMaster 2.0. We have in my opinion, much nicer, easier on the eyes front end that's a little more self-explanatory for users to pick up the platform and immediately start looking through their briefings and actions. So that's a little bit easier on the eyes. We've added some elements that are easier to hide when it comes to providing feedback, and then we've also added some slight new features that were teased in the last series of demo videos to actually increase the power behind TaskMaster. So kicking off very easy with the briefings page. Most of the stuff we've already seen here. We have our personal briefing, and then we have our team briefing for subordinate personnel over which this user oversees their day-to-day activities. We've made it so that the hyperlinks take up the entire relevant bullet point. We think that's just a little bit easier on the eyes, a little bit easier to track what data is relevant to what recommendation or what action. And then, as you can see here, feedback is now collapsible. So we can kind of hide it away, get it out of sight if needed, and then you can go ahead, add your stars and comments, and submit there, and then go ahead and retract feedback when you're done. So just some UI housekeeping to start. Moving over to actions, a lot of the same color coding our thoughts, actions, and execute options just to make it easier to track what data goes where. Same thing with the feedback, we kind of hid it away a little bit more. And the submit button at the bottom doesn't just submit whether or not we want to execute an action, it'll also submit our feedback in all one go. So that just makes the action page a little bit more seamless, easier to use from a user perspective. Going over to settings, slightly more robust account information. And now we have both individual file permissions and organization permissions. So at a top level, these look almost the same, except we see the My Data and Personal Data here. This is accessible to every user in an environment if it is activated by the organization level admin. And this gives our users the ability to select whether data sources they have ownership of are processed by TaskMaster. So similar to before, we can turn off an entire data source like the CRM, or we can go through and say, hey, let's turn off personal documents, or let's turn off team documents that this user, so in this case me, has ownership of. I'm not turning off all the team documents, just the documents within our team's SharePoint that I have direct ownership over. So slight little variation in detail there. Organization permissions stays the same. This is accessible to admins only, and if you were to deactivate Outlook here, that means Outlook is turned off for the entire organization. But again, there's some nice UI changes here. Makes it really easy to see, hey, HR documents are turned off, but here we can turn them back on. And now we can see through sort of the subfolder directory a little bit easier as well. I think the previous layout we had made it kind of difficult to track what was like a subdirectory of someone's Outlook in whatever conversation. This layout is much easier on the eyes, and you can really quickly see, hey, HR documents are turned off. Maybe that's why we're not seeing the data that we want to see. So we can turn that on and then save those changes or discard, and they go right back to normal, right? So the organization permissions have been updated, and then we've added individual user permissions. We've got basic billing and invoice history here, and then we have our integration sources. So here we can turn off an entire integration. What this means is not only are we not pulling data in next time TaskMaster is running, but we're actually fully disconnecting this data. So if TaskMaster decided, hey, I need to go into HubSpot to pull more context for this upcoming briefing, and we hit disconnect, first we're going to get a little warning because disconnecting something like HubSpot is going to have a pretty dramatic impact on TaskMaster's capability. And as you can see here, if we reconnect more than a day or two later, you're probably going to have to go through the admin level permissions authentication pipeline again. Now, that's only a few minutes of your time. Maybe it's no big deal, but it's something that we want users to be aware of before they go ahead and select disconnect. We can also see the last time that we pulled data from a particular data source. As you can see here, we have a few integrations. Office 365 and Google Workspace are the two primary ones. As you can see, we have a HubSpot CRM. We have support for Salesforce. pull in communication from Slack, similar to Teams. You can pull in transcripts from Zoom meetings, and then similar to how we have SharePoint and OneDrive, let's say you're leveraging Dropbox instead, we can go ahead and integrate Dropbox in there for you guys. API keys will be coming soon. This is just sort of a place marker for now. We mentioned organization permissions, and then the big one is going to be user management. So on top of just the UI overhaul, easier to select and deselect admin roles as well, you can see that we've also added role, team, and team lead. So role is just that. It's this employee's role or title. TaskMaster takes that into account to help add more context when generating reports or actions. Knowing that someone's a manager versus a developer, for example, is going to lead to very different recommendations as to how they spend their day, right? A manager is going to be checking in on employees, engaging in more managerial tasks, while a front-end developer is probably going to spend a decent amount of time programming a UI like the one we see before us. We also have team. As you can see, some people are on the same team, the front-end team. This helps organize users within an organization because John and Bob, for example, are probably going to work together hand in hand more so than Alice, who's a manager on the product team. Alice might have a little bit of oversight as to what Bob and John are doing on a day-to-day basis, but these two are going to be communicating directly a lot more often. We also have team lead. So this is a yes or no designation. We encourage that there's really only one team lead per team, but we can adjust that to be multiple if necessary. Team lead is the person who has visibility over the team briefings for that team, and then they can make adjustments for some team members as well. So they can change, let's say a role has changed or there's some additional detail that needs to be added there. A team lead might be able to make those decisions. But as we said, we can go through, and let's say Alice isn't a manager anymore. Let's say she's a director. We can go ahead and make that change. So now next time TaskMaster runs, we can see that Alice has been promoted from a manager to a director. Or maybe Jane actually does become the team lead. Go ahead and click that on for her. That way she has access to her team members' briefings and can make those adjustments that we mentioned earlier. So more or less, it's mostly a UI update, but there's a handful of features in there that I think really help bring TaskMaster to life a little bit more. Helps generate even better briefings and better actions, because the more context and the more refined data that we can pull into that pipeline, that we can pull into that process, the better output that we will get from TaskMaster. On top of this, we've made some adjustments to our cloud infrastructure such that TaskMaster can run faster and more cost effectively for each of our registered organizations. But from an actual user perspective, these are the big updates. These are the big features and changes that we wanted to show off. We will also have a version of this live and ready to use at the business show, where you can plug in your email for your organization. And if you only have individual permissions, we'll generate a briefing just based on your activities. If you have organization level permissions, we'll show you what an entire team level briefing and actions recommendation will look like. We'll have a few tablets and laptops set up for your convenience. So if you're at the business show and you'd like to see how TaskMaster runs, sort of fresh off the production line with you first signing in, come and swing by our booth. We'd be more than happy to see you. Other than that, check out our website at intellisync.ai or shoot myself or Dylan or our sales team an email. We'd be more than happy to get you set up. We already have some teams from as small as 5 personnel to as large as, I believe, 30 plus, who have leveraged TaskMaster to start automating some of their workflows, some of their pipelines, and these are the feature recommendations that they've been requesting most. And so we'll see what their progress looks like over the next few weeks and report back as to just how impactful these changes really were to our production users. So thank you for your time. We look forward to hearing from you soon, and give TaskMaster your serious consideration to help ameliorate some of the issues and hurdles that may be impacting your day-to-day life or your small to large business team's life.